The Galactic Training Academy stood on a planet called Nexus Prime. It was a huge building made of shiny metal and glass. Students from many different planets came here to learn how to fight and how to keep peace in the galaxy. The academy had been running for thousands of years, and it was known as the best place to train soldiers and officers. Daniel Price was a human. He was 26 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes. 6 months ago, he had been working on a cargo ship, fixing engines and patching holes in the walls. He was good with his hands. He could fix almost anything, but he never thought he would end up here, in a place where beings from across the stars came to become warriors. Humans were new to the galaxy. Earth had only met alien life 3 years ago. Before that, humans thought they were alone in the universe. Now they knew the truth. There were hundreds of species out there, and most of them had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Compared to them, humans were like babies taking their first steps. The Academy had accepted only 12 humans that year. Daniel was one of them. He felt the weight of that every single day. When he walked through the halls, he could feel the eyes of alien students on him. Some looked at him with curiosity. Others looked at him with something close to pity. A few looked at him like he was dirt on their shoes. His roommate was a being called Kos. Kos was a Volante, a tall creature that looked like a giant insect. He had big eyes that reflected light like broken glass, and his mouth had parts that clicked when he talked. Kos came from a family of warriors. His ancestors had been generals and admirals for 10,000 years. He was polite to Daniel, but there was always a pause before he spoke, like he was not sure how to talk to such a simple creature. Daniel woke up early that morning. The alarm was a soft sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He got out of bed and put on his silver uniform. It was the same uniform that every student wore, but somehow it felt wrong on him, like he was pretending to be something he was not. "Today is combat class," Kos said. His voice came through a small device that turned his clicks and buzzes into words Daniel could understand. Instructor Varn will be teaching. Daniel had heard stories about Instructor Varn. The Karathi was a veteran of many wars. He had medals and honors from battles that humans could not even imagine. He was also known for hating what he called lesser species. And to Instructor Varn, humans were about as lesser as they came. The classroom was not really a classroom at all. It was more like an arena. There were seats rising up in circles around a central platform. The platform was made of some dark material that seemed to swallow light. When Daniel walked on it later, he would feel like he was walking on nothing at all. He took a seat among the other students. Kitty Morrison sat 2 rows ahead of him. She had red hair tied back in a tight braid, and she was one of the smartest people Daniel had ever met. She caught his eye and gave him a small smile before turning back around. Next to her was Ben Schultz, a big man who used to be a soldier on Earth. Ben did not talk much, but when he did, people listened. The room filled up with students of all kinds. There were Volante like Kos, their insect bodies folding into seats designed for many different shapes. There were Dreth, huge creatures covered in natural armor that made them look like walking tanks. There were Karathi, tall reptile-like beings with scales that changed color depending on their mood. And there were many others, species that Daniel did not even know the names of yet. Then Instructor Varn walked in. The Karathi was almost 8 feet tall. His scales were deep purple, turning to black on his arms and legs. His eyes were solid gold, with no white part and no dark center. They looked like coins made of sunlight. When those eyes swept across the room, Daniel felt like he was being judged and found wanting. "Today we talk about weapons," Varn said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the arena. "The Coalition keeps peace because we have better weapons than anyone who would make war. This is not an idea. This is a fact. This is math. He waved his hand, and pictures appeared in the air around him. Guns that shot balls of burning light. Bombs that could twist space itself. Shields that existed half in another dimension. Each picture had numbers and words scrolling beside it, but they moved too fast for Daniel to read. Every old species has given something to our weapons, Varn continued. The Volanthi made blades that can cut through anything. The Dreth made shields that cannot be broken. My people, the Karathi, made the particle lance that ended the Second War of Expansion. A student raised its hand. It was a small creature with too many arms. What about the new species, Instructor? The humans and the Falari? Varn's face did not change, but something in the way he stood made Daniel think he was amused. The Falari gave us better medicine. As for the humans, he turned to look right at the section where Daniel and the other human students sat. They have given us nothing. Their weapons are simple. They use chemicals to push metal. They use fire and explosions. They are thousands of years behind us. Daniel felt his face grow hot. Around him, the other human students shifted in their seats. He could feel the eyes of all the alien students on them, looking at them with pity and scorn. Perhaps, Varn said, his voice almost friendly now, one of the human students would like to show us their species' weapons. A practical showing often teaches better than words. The silence was thick and heavy. Daniel saw Katie's shoulders go stiff. Ben's jaw was tight. The other humans looked down at their desks or suddenly became very interested in their datapads. Daniel's hand went up before. He knew he was raising it. Varn's golden eyes locked onto him. Student Price, you volunteer? Yes, Instructor. Good. Come down to the platform. Daniel stood up. His legs felt strange, like they belonged to someone else. He walked down the stairs, feeling every eye in the room follow him. The dark platform seemed to pull at his feet as he stepped onto it. Up close, Instructor Varn was even bigger than he had looked from the seats. Heat came off the Karathi's body, making Daniel's skin prickle. You may choose any weapon from the Academy storage, Varn said. Show us how it is used and explain why it is useful in battle. I do not need the storage, Instructor. Varn's head tilted to one side, like a bird looking at something strange. Explain. Humans do not need weapons that are already made. We can make one from anything. The words hung in the air. Around the arena, Daniel heard confused sounds, translation devices working hard to explain what he meant. Varn stood very still for a long moment. Anything, the Karathi repeated. That is a big claim, Student Price. It is not a claim, Instructor. It is a fact. Varn spread his arms wide, pointing at everything around them. Then show us. Make a weapon. Here. Now. From whatever you can find in this room. Daniel looked around the arena. The seats were made of smooth material with no sharp edges. The walls were too hard to break. The floor ate everything. But on each desk there were small things. Datapads, writing tools. And at the far end of the arena, he could see a small room where cleaning supplies were kept. His eyes stopped on the desk nearest to him. It was made of pressed plant material from some faraway world. It was strong, but it would break the right way if you hit it the right way. This desk, Daniel said, putting his hand flat on its surface. I can make a weapon from this desk. Every student in the arena watched Daniel Price. They did not understand what he was doing. The desk was just a desk. It was a simple piece of furniture, nothing more. It had a flat top and 4 legs bolted to the floor. There was nothing special about it at all. Student Price, Instructor Vaughn said, and there was a new sound in his voice. It might have been impatience. It might have been something else. We do not have all day. If you cannot do what you said you would do. Daniel brought his fist down on the desk. The sound was loud and sharp. Several students jumped in their seats. A crack appeared in the surface of the desk, spreading out from where Daniel had hit it like a spider web. He hit it again, and again. Each time, his fist landed in exactly the right spot. Each time, the crack grew bigger. The desk broke into pieces. Daniel got down on his knees and started going through the broken parts. He picked up each piece and looked at it carefully. Some were too short. Some were too curved. Some were too thin. He threw those aside. Others he kept, setting them in a neat pile beside him. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. The translation devices carried the question to every ear in the room. Katie Morrison watched from her seat. Her hands were pressed together so tight that her knuckles had gone white. She had grown up on a farm back on Earth. She had seen her father build things with his hands many times. Fences from fallen trees, tools from scrap metal, shelters from whatever was lying around. But she had never seen anyone use those skills for something like this. Daniel picked out two pieces of the desk that he liked. One was thick and heavy, about as long as his forearm. The other was thinner and longer, with a natural point at one end. He held them up to the light, turning them slowly, looking at them from different angles. Then he started to work. From his pocket, he pulled out a small tool. Every student at the academy carried one. It was meant for small repairs and adjustments. It had a cutting edge, but the edge was very small, no bigger than Daniel's thumbnail. He used this tiny blade to scrape along the thinner piece of wood, taking off thin strips with each stroke. "The first weapons that humans made were stone," Daniel said. His voice was calm and steady, like he was giving a lecture instead of doing something that no one in the room had ever seen before. "We took rocks and hit them against other rocks until we had sharp edges. We tied those sharp rocks to sticks and made spears. We carved clubs from branches and learned to swing them hard enough to break bones." Thin strips of wood fell around his feet like pale snow. The piece in his hands was changing shape with every stroke. The end was becoming sharper. The edges were becoming smoother. It was starting to look like something that could cut. Later, we found metal. First, we used soft metal, bronze. Then we learned to make iron, then steel. We learned to heat the metal until it glowed. We learned to hammer it and fold it and shape it. We made swords that could cut through armor. We made axes that could split shields. We made knives that could slip between ribs and find the heart. He stopped scraping and looked at the edge he had made. It was rough, not smooth like the edges on the alien weapons in Varn's pictures. But it would cut. If you pushed it hard enough into soft flesh, it would cut just fine. He moved to the thicker piece now. Using the same small tool, he carved a groove along one side. The groove was long and deep, just the right size for the thinner piece to fit into. But the weapons were not what made humans dangerous. Any species can learn to make swords and guns. Any species can learn to throw spears and shoot arrows. What made humans dangerous was something else. It was our ability to see weapons everywhere. In every rock. In every stick. In every piece of trash. The groove was done. Daniel fitted the sharpened piece into it, testing how it sat. He moved it a little to the left, then a little to the right, until it was perfect. Then he pulled a length of cord from his pocket. This was also standard equipment, meant for tying down gear when there was no gravity. He wrapped it around the joint where the two pieces met, pulling it tight, making loop after loop until the two pieces were held together as one. When we ran out of bullets, we threw rocks. When we ran out of rocks, we used our fists. When enemies captured us and took everything away, we made weapons from our chains. We made weapons from the furniture in our cells. We made weapons from the bones of the dead. The thing in his hands was a weapon now. Anyone could see it. It was rough and ugly, nothing like the beautiful weapons in Varn's pictures. The blade was about 18 inches long, the handle about the same. There was no shine to it, no glow, no hum of hidden power. It looked like something from the ancient past of humanity, something that should have been in a museum, not in the hands of a living person. It was a sword. Daniel held it up so everyone could see. The arena was completely silent. Even the translation devices seemed to have gone quiet. This is what humans are, Instructor Vaughn. We do not need your weapon storage. We do not need your factories or your advanced materials. Give us scraps, and we will make something that can kill. Varn had not moved since Daniel started working. His golden eyes were fixed on the weapon, and his face showed nothing. The silence in the room had changed. Before, it had been the silence of boredom and contempt. Now, it was something else. Now it was the silence of fear. A rough tool, the Karathi said at last. It would be useless against modern armor. Against your armor, yes. Daniel took a step forward, and for the first time, Varn took a half step back. But armor has gaps. Joints where the plates meet. Eye holes where the face shows through. And humans have been fighting for survival since before we came down from the trees. We know where to put the blade. He flipped the sword around, catching it by the blade and holding the handle toward Varn. Would you like to feel how sharp it is, Instructor? Varn did not take the weapon. Instead, he turned to face the students, his movements perhaps a little faster than they had been before. Class is over. We will continue talking about this tomorrow. The students began to leave, their voices filling the arena with confused sounds. Translation devices worked hard to turn those sounds into words. Daniel stood on the platform, the sword still in his hand, watching them go. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find Katie Morrison standing beside him. That was either the bravest thing I have ever seen, she said. Her voice low, or the most stupid. Probably both, Daniel admitted. Ben Schultz walked up from the other side. His face was thoughtful, which was unusual for him. Where did you learn to do that? My grandfather was a soldier. He taught me things that are not in any official book. Daniel looked down at the sword in his hand, at the rough edges and the simple blade. He always said that the most dangerous weapon in the world is a human being who refuses to give up. Across the arena, Instructor Varn was watching them. His golden eyes held something new, something that Daniel could not quite figure out. It might have been respect. It might have been fear. It might have been the first small understanding of what humanity really was. Whatever it was, Daniel had a feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than himself. The story of what Daniel Price did spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. By the time the evening meal came, every student on Nexus Prime had heard some version of it. The human who had stood up to Instructor Varn, the primitive who had made a weapon from a desk, the newcomer who had refused to accept his place at the bottom. Daniel sat in the eating hall, trying to finish his food while ignoring all the looks he was getting. The food had no taste in his mouth. His stomach felt twisted up with a mix of pride and worry. He had made his point, yes, but he had also made himself a target. You have become famous, Ka said, sitting down across from him. The Volante's big eyes reflected the lights above them in broken patterns. Or maybe the word is infamous. I am not sure which is right. Great, Daniel said quietly. Just what I wanted. The other students have different views about what you did. Some think you showed good spirit. Others think you insulted Instructor Varn and shamed yourself. Koss paused, his mouthparts clicking softly. I am not sure which view is correct. Katie came over and sat down next to Daniel. Varn has been talking to the other teachers. I do not know what he is saying, but they keep looking toward the human living quarters. We have been noticed, Ben added, taking a seat next to Koss. The big man's voice was flat as always, but there was a small light in his eyes that might have been amusement. Every species in this place is paying attention to us now, Daniel pushed his food around on his plate. I did not mean to start anything. You just refused to let them look down on us. Katie finished for him. I do not blame you. The way they talk about us, like we are barely worth teaching, like they let us in out of pity. She shook her head, making her red braid swing. Someone needed to push back. A shadow fell across their table. Daniel looked up and saw a Dreth standing over them. The Dreth were huge beings covered in natural armor that grew from their own bodies. This one's shell was a deep blue color, which meant high status among its kind. You are the human who made the weapon, the Dreth said. Its voice was surprisingly soft and musical, not matching its scary appearance at all. I am called Horizon at Dawn. I want to understand what you showed today. Daniel looked at his fellow humans. Katie gave a small shrug. Ben's face showed nothing. Koss had gone very still, which Daniel had learned was the Volante way of paying close attention. Sit down, Daniel said. If you can find a seat that fits you. Horizon at Dawn made a sound that the translation device called laughter. The Dreth settled onto the floor beside the table, which brought its eyes level with Daniel's. Among my people, we believe that warriors are born with their weapons already inside their souls. The physical blade is just an outer sign of an inner truth. And you think that is what you saw today? I think, Horizon at Dawn said slowly, that I saw something I did not expect. Your species is young. Your machines are simple. Your place in the coalition is not certain. And yet, the Dreth's big head tilted to one side. You stood in front of one of the most decorated warriors in the galaxy and did not back down. Was I supposed to back down? Every other new species has. The Falari almost ended their student program after their first meeting with Varn. The Tassari sent official complaints about how he teaches. But you, Horizon at Dawn leaned closer, its breath warm against Daniel's face. You challenged him. With a piece of furniture. Daniel could see other students watching from across the eating hall. Volante and Karate and many other species, all looking at this strange group at the human table. He understood that this conversation was itself a kind of show. A public sign of interest from one of the Academy's most important non-human students. My grandfather told me something once, Daniel said, speaking loud enough for others to hear. He said that weapons do not make a warrior. A warrior makes weapons. You can take away their guns and knives and armor. You can strip them down to nothing but skin and bone. And they will still find a way to fight. Because the weapon is not in their hands. It is in their head. Horizon at Dawn was quiet for a long moment. Then the Dreth stood up, towering over the table once more. I would like to learn more about this way of thinking. Maybe we could train together sometime. I would like that, Daniel said. The Dreth nodded and walked away, its heavy steps echoing through the eating hall. After it left, the sound of talking rose up like a wave. Translation devices worked hard to help everyone understand what had just happened. Katie let out a breath she had been holding. Did that really happen? Did a Dreth just ask to train with a human? The Dreth respects strength, Koss said, and there was something new in his voice. It sounded almost like respect. They are one of the most traditional species in the coalition. For one of their high-status students to come to you in front of everyone. He stopped, his big eyes fixed on Daniel. You have changed something today, Daniel Price. I do not know what, but I can feel it. Over the next few days, more students came to talk to Daniel. They wanted to know about human fighting. They wanted to understand how humans could see weapons in everything. Horizon at Dawn became a regular visitor at the human table, asking questions and sharing fighting techniques from Dreth tradition. Even Koss started treating Daniel differently. More like a real friend than a strange curiosity, but not everyone was happy about the change. A group of karate students started following Daniel through the halls. They would mutter things in their own language, their translation devices conveniently failing to work. Instructor Varn grew colder in his classes. His golden eyes tracked Daniel's movements like a hunter watching prey. One evening, Daniel was walking back to his quarters when he found 3 Karathi blocking his path. Their scales were dark red, a color that meant old warrior blood. The biggest one stepped forward. "The primitive thinks he is special now," the Karathi said, "because he can break furniture." Daniel stopped walking but did not back up. "I do not want trouble. Trouble has found you anyway, human. You embarrassed our teacher. You made our people look foolish in front of the whole academy. I showed what humans can do. That is all." The Karathi laughed, an ugly sound. "What humans can do is die. Your species is weak. Your bodies are soft. Your lives are short. You do not belong here." Daniel felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. The old lessons from his grandfather whispered in his mind. Look for weapons. Look for escape routes. Count your enemies. Know your own limits. Before anyone could move, a new voice spoke up. "Is there a problem here?" Horizon at dawn stepped out of the shadows. The Dreth's armored body seemed to fill the entire hallway. Behind it came Katie and Ben, and behind them came half a dozen other students from different species. All of them were looking at the Karathi with unfriendly eyes. The lead Karathi's scales shifted color, just a little. A sign of surprise, maybe even fear. "This is not your business, Dreth. Daniel Price is my training partner. That makes it my business." Horizon at dawn took another step forward. "Walk away, now." The Karathi looked at their odds. 3 of them against 8, including a Dreth in full armor. Even warrior pride had its limits. They backed down, muttering threats that their translation devices were careful not to share. When they were gone, Daniel let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "Thank you. You showed us something important," Horizon at dawn said. "Now we show you something important too. In this galaxy, strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it is the sword in your hand. Sometimes it is the friends at your back." Katie put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You started something, Daniel. Something bigger than just proving a point in class." "Maybe," Daniel said, looking at the mixed group of beings that had come to stand beside him. Humans and aliens, species that had never worked together before. "Or maybe I just reminded everyone of something they had forgotten." "What is that?" Koss asked. Daniel smiled. "That the most dangerous weapons are not always the ones you can see." 3 weeks passed since Daniel Price had made his sword from desk pieces. In that time, everything at the academy had begun to change. More and more students came to him, wanting to learn about human fighting methods. Horizon at dawn trained with him almost every day, and even Koss had started asking questions about how humans could make tools from nothing. But the Karathi had not forgotten, and they had not forgiven. The challenge came on a cool morning in the academy's main training yard. Daniel was practicing with Ben and Katie, working through simple hand-to-hand combat moves. They were sweating and breathing hard when a group of Karathi students walked up to them. The leader was a huge Karathi named Grath. He was almost as tall as Instructor Varn, built like a living mountain. His scales were deep red, the color of old blood, showing that his family had been warriors for thousands of years. "The primitive wants to play at fighting," Grath said loudly. His voice carried across the whole training yard. Other students stopped what they were doing to watch. Maybe he should face a real test. Daniel stood up straight and wiped the sweat from his face. "I am always ready to learn." "Learn." Grath made the words sound like something dirty. What could a human learn from species who had mastered war while your ancestors were still eating each other in caves? Katie stepped forward, her face red with anger, but Daniel put a hand on her arm. "Let me handle this." He walked toward Grath, very aware of how much bigger the Karathi was. Grath stood almost 3 feet taller than Daniel. His arms were as thick as tree trunks. His claws could cut through metal armor like paper. By any normal thinking, Daniel should have been scared out of his mind. Instead, he felt strangely calm. "What kind of test did you have in mind?" Daniel asked. Grath's eyes narrowed. He had expected fear. He had expected the human to back down. A formal fight. Old rules. First blood or giving up. Weapons? Standard training blades. Unless, Grath bent down, his hot breath washing over Daniel's face, you would rather make one from trash? Some of the Karathi students laughed. Daniel smiled. "Actually," he said, "I would." The laughing stopped. Grath straightened up, confusion showing on his reptile face. "You are making fun of me." "Not at all. You are offering me a fight under old rules. I accept. But I will use a weapon I make myself, from things I find in this yard." Whispers ran through the growing crowd. More and more students were coming, drawn by the promise of a fight. Daniel saw Horizon at dawn pushing through the press of bodies, the dress's armored form making a path. "You cannot be serious," Grath said. "No handmade weapon could stand against a Karathi training blade. They are made from special metals. They are tuned to cut better than anything else. Then you have nothing to worry about." Academy rules said that formal fights needed 1 day of notice. This gave both sides time to prepare and let the medical staff get ready. Daniel spent that day walking around the training yard, looking at every surface, every piece of equipment, every scrap of material. Katie found him near the equipment building as the sun went down. "You are really going to do this?" "I am. It will cut you apart." Those training blades are not toys. They are almost as dangerous as real weapons. Daniel picked up a piece of metal pipe that had been left over from some repair work. He felt its weight, tested how it balanced in his hand, then set it aside. "When I was 12 years old, my grandfather took me camping in the mountains. First night out, a bear got into our food. Destroyed everything. We were 3 days from any town with nothing but the clothes on our backs." Katie sat down on an old box, listening. "My grandfather did not panic. He just looked around at what we had and started working. He made traps from our shoelaces. He built a fishing spear from a branch and a pocket knife. He found plants we could eat that I would have walked right past. We made it back, and I learned something that stayed with me forever." "What?" Daniel picked up another piece of metal, longer than the first one. "Resources are not just what you bring with you. Resources are everywhere, in everything, if you know how to look. The only limit is your mind and your will to live." He worked through the whole night. When morning came, he was ready. The training yard was packed with students. Every species at the academy had sent people to watch. They pressed against the ropes that marked the fighting circle. Instructor Vaughn stood on a raised platform. His job was to judge the fight. His golden eyes showed nothing. Grath entered the circle first. His training blade was beautiful, a curved sword with an edge that hummed with hidden power. He moved through warm-up exercises, his body fluid and precise. Thousands of years of warrior training flowed through every movement. Then Daniel entered, and the whole crowd went silent. In his hands was something that should not exist. A sword, almost 4 feet long, made from the metal pipe he had found. The blade had been hammered flat against the concrete floor. He had sharpened the edge by rubbing it on stone for hours. The handle was wrapped in strips of cloth, torn from old training mats. 2 bolts tied with wire made a simple crossguard. It was ugly. It was rough. It looked like something from humanity's ancient past, and it was a weapon. "This is what you choose?" Grath asked. His voice was full of disbelief. "This thing?" Daniel raised his blade in a formal salute. "This is what I choose." The fight began. Grath attacked first. The Karathi moved faster than something so big should be able to move. His training blade cut a glowing line through the air. Daniel barely got his handmade sword up in time. The impact ran through his arms like electricity. Metal screamed against the special metal of Grath's blade. Sparks flew across the fighting circle. Daniel moved back, his feet sliding on the packed dirt as Grath pushed his attack. "Your primitive toy will break," Grath growled. He swung again and again, forcing Daniel to block desperately. "And when it does, I will write my name in your flesh." Daniel said nothing. He saved his breath. He focused on the sword in his hands. He felt every shake and shiver running through the metal. His grandfather had taught him to listen to his weapons, to understand what they could do, and what they could not do through touch alone. The handmade sword was bending under the attack, but it was not breaking. The metal he had chosen was not the hardest in the yard, but it was the most flexible. Where a stiff blade would have snapped, this one took the hits and spread them along its length. Grath's attacks grew wilder, more frustrated. He had expected this to be over in seconds. A quick shaming of the human who had dared to challenge Karathi honor. Instead, Daniel was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to fall. The crowd made no sound. On his platform, Instructor Varn had leaned forward. His golden eyes were fixed on the fighters with fierce attention. Daniel felt the rhythm of the fight changing. Grath's swings were getting wider, sloppier. The Karathi was strong, but he was used to enemies who fought the same way he did, who responded to attacks in ways he could predict. Daniel was doing something different. Daniel was waiting. The opening came like a door swinging wide. Grath put everything he had into one massive overhead strike. He brought his glowing blade down with all his weight behind it. It was meant to end the fight. It was meant to smash through any defense and drive Daniel to his knees. Against any enemy who tried to block it straight on, it would have worked. Daniel did not block. He stepped to the side, letting the glowing blade pass within inches of his shoulder. At the same time, his own sword came up in a tight curve. The sharpened edge found the gap between the armored scales on Grath's arm. Blood sprayed across the fighting circle. Grath stumbled back. His free hand pressed against the wound on his arm. The cut was not deep. By Karathi standards, it was barely a scratch. But it was there. Everyone could see it. And by the rules of the fight, it decided everything. First blood, Instructor Varn's voice rang out across the silent yard. Victory to Student Price. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crowd stood frozen. Then Horizon at Dawn began to clap. The sound of huge armored hands hitting together was like thunder. Others joined in. Humans and aliens together. The training yard filled with the sound of applause. Grath stared at Daniel. His face showed shock, then anger, then finally something that might have been grudging respect. He looked down at the wound on his arm. He looked at the blood seeping between his fingers. He looked at the ugly, rough weapon that had put it there. "How?" Grath asked. His voice was barely loud enough to hear over the crowd. Daniel lowered his sword. He was breathing hard. "You looked at me and saw something lesser. A primitive. Someone not worth taking seriously." He pointed at the weapon in his hands. "You looked at this and saw junk. Something beneath your notice." He stepped closer, holding Grath's eyes. "That is what makes humans dangerous. Not our weapons. Not our machines. Our willingness to fight with whatever we have, however we can, for as long as it takes. You can strip us of everything, and we will still find a way." The crowd parted as Daniel walked toward the edge of the circle. His fellow humans were there waiting. Katie had tears running down her face. Ben had the closest thing to a smile that Daniel had ever seen on him. Horizon at dawn stood behind them, radiating approval, but it was Instructor Varn who stopped him. The Karathi had come down from his platform. His golden eyes were fixed on Daniel with that same unreadable look. The crowd fell silent again, not sure what to expect. "Student Price," Varn said. "When you first raised your hand in my class, I thought you were foolish. A primitive making empty boasts." Daniel said nothing. He waited. I was wrong. The words seemed to cost Varn something, but he said them clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your species has been underestimated. That ends today." He turned to face all the students. "Let everyone know that the humans have shown us a fighting way worth studying. Starting now, I will change my teaching to include making weapons from found materials and fighting that adapts to any situation." His golden eyes swept the crowd. "All students will learn these things." The murmur that ran through the crowd was different now. Not scorn, not pity, something closer to anticipation. Daniel looked at the sword in his hand, at the rough metal, at the cloth-wrapped handle, at the blood drying on its edge. It was ugly and simple and not perfect, just like humanity itself. But it had been enough dot in the weeks and months that followed. Things changed at the academy in ways no one had predicted. Humans were no longer pushed aside as primitives barely worth teaching. Instead, they became teachers themselves. They showed techniques that older species had long forgotten. The art of making something from nothing. The skill of seeing weapons in everything around you. Daniel found himself in high demand. Students from every species wanted to train with him. They wanted to learn how a human mind worked, how it could look at a piece of junk and see a deadly weapon, how it could be stripped of everything and still refuse to give up. Katie became an instructor in survival techniques. She taught students how to find food in strange environments, how to build shelters from whatever was at hand, how to stay alive when everything seemed lost. Then taught close combat, showing how the human body itself could be a weapon. Even Koss started incorporating human methods into the lengthy fighting styles. Horizon at Dawn became Daniel's closest friend among the alien students. The Dreth warrior and the human mechanic made a strange pair, but they understood each other in ways that went beyond words. Both knew what it meant to prove yourself when everyone expected you to fail. One evening, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the academy grounds. The sun of Nexus Prime was setting, painting the sky in colors that Earth had never seen. Instructor Varn came to stand beside him. "I have taught at this academy for 40 years, the Karathi said. "I have seen students from 100 different species. I thought I knew everything about what makes a warrior." Daniel said nothing. He had learned that Varn sometimes needed time to find his words. "Your species has been part of the galaxy for only 3 years. You have no great fleets. You have no ancient traditions. By every measure we use, you should be nothing." Varn turned to look at Daniel, his golden eyes reflecting the setting sun. "And yet here you are, changing everything." "We are stubborn," Daniel said. "My grandfather used to say that was our best and worst quality. It is a quality that the older species have forgotten." Varn was quiet for a moment. "We became too comfortable. We made better and better weapons, and we forgot what weapons really are. We forgot that the weapon is not the sword or the gun or the bomb. The weapon is the will to use it." Daniel nodded. He thought about his grandfather, about the lessons the old man had taught him, about making spears from sticks and traps from shoelaces, about never giving up, no matter how bad things looked. "Do you know what the other instructors say about you now?" Varn asked. "I try not to listen to gossip. They say that when the next war comes, they want humans fighting beside them." Varn's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. "They say that any species that can make a sword from desk pieces is a species they do not want as an enemy." Daniel laughed. It felt good to laugh. "We are just trying to find our place out here. You have found it, Varn said. And it is not at the bottom where we tried to put you. It is standing beside us as equals, perhaps even as teachers. The Karathi straightened to his full height. I am not too proud to admit when I was wrong, Student Price. You showed me something that day in my classroom. You showed all of us. What was that? Varn looked out at the academy, at the students from 100 worlds learning to work together. You showed us that the newest species in the galaxy might just be the one we have the most to learn from. He walked away, leaving Daniel alone with the sunset. Daniel thought about everything that had happened since that day in combat class. He thought about the sword he had made from broken furniture. He thought about the fight with Grath. He thought about all the students who had come to him, wanting to learn the human way of seeing weapons in everything. His grandfather had been right. The most dangerous weapon in the universe was not a gun or a bomb or a blade. It was a human being who refused to quit. And now the whole galaxy was learning that lesson. Daniel smiled and went back inside. Tomorrow there would be more students to teach, more techniques to share, more proof that humanity belonged among the stars. The instructor had asked for a weapon demonstration. Daniel had given him something much more valuable. He had shown him what it meant to be human.